Evan McMullin joins me now, and for what it's worth, we invited Senator Lee on the program as well, but he declined to appear for this Sunday. We hope to ask him again. Mr. McMullin, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good to be with you, Chuck.
Let me start with what we heard from your opponent this week. Let me play what Senator Lee said on Fox News with Tucker Carlson.
I'm asking him right here again tonight, right now. Mitt, if you'd like to protect the Republican majority, give us any chance of seizing the Republican majority once again, getting it away from the Democrats who are facilitating this massive spending spree and a massive inflationary binge. Please get on board. Help me win re-election. Help us do that.
Have you spoken to Senator Romney about his neutrality, and do you expect him to stay neutral in this race?
Well, I haven't spoken to him about it, but I deeply respect Senator Romney's leadership in the Senate for Utah and for our country. And I respect and appreciate his decision to stay out of this race. And that's about all I can say. I don't know what his decision will be going forward. But yes, I would expect him to stick with the decision that he's made. But I haven't spoken with him about it.
Senator Lee is implying essentially that a vote for you is a vote for the Democrats to keep their majority. Is he right?
Look, no, because I am running as an independent. And look, I'm building a coalition of Republicans, Democrats, independents, and members of third parties to better represent Utah and to help lead our country forward. And I'm not going to Washington to join a party or to caucus or to play the party power game. I'm going to represent our coalition, and that's a commitment that I've made to our coalition, that I'll maintain my independence.
All 6 years? If you serve all 6 years, the entire time you're in the Senate, you will not join either party's caucus, giving them officially your vote?
No, Chuck, I will not. I will maintain my independence. I will not caucus with either side. And by the way, Chuck, I think that this will give Utah added value of influence in the Senate that it just doesn't have. Certainly we have in Senator Romney someone who has gotten a lot done for our state and our country, working across party lines to get things done.
Yeah.
With Senator Lee, we get none of that. He sits on his hands until it's time to vote no, and then he goes and complains about our country on cable news. And I'm just not going to do that. I think that we've seen well enough over the past year or two, especially, that the senators in the chamber who are willing to act with greater independence, serving their constituents, standing up to party bosses, standing up to extremist factions and special interest groups, they have the most influence in the chamber. They're more influential, I think, even than the party bosses. And I want that for Utah, and I know we'll do a great deal of good with it serving this way.
Look, there's easily a scenario that could happen where you win your seat. Republicans are sitting at 50 Senate, have 50 Senate seats. Democrats have 49. You're the one. And I want to ask you this question. You tweeted this in January of 2021. You said, not only should Mitch McConnell never be majority leader again, he shouldn't be minority leader either. It's time for something new. This eventuality may be in your hands. The scenario I painted may make it where you decide whether Mitch McConnell is majority leader or minority leader. If you're in that scenario, are you just going to stick with being an independent and let the chips fall where they may and know that Mitch McConnell is going to be majority leader?
Well, look, the parties are going to decide who they choose to lead them. I won't be part of that as an independent. And whatever scenario, Chuck, the parties in Washington and others, they're going to have to figure out what this means for them on their own. I'm committed to maintaining my independence. I'm building a cross-partisan coalition. I also believe that our country just needs more independent leaders who will stand up to party bosses of both sides, the special interest groups who own too many of our politicians, and also to the extremist factions that I think have far too much influence in Washington. I'm committed to doing that. I've made a commitment to this coalition that I'll maintain my independence. And as I said, for the parties and the bosses in Washington, they'll have to decide what this means on their own.
A couple of bills I want to ask you about if you were in the Senate. The Inflation Reduction Act. You have said there's some good things in it. There's some things you didn't like. But at the end of the day, you got to vote for, sometimes you got to vote on a compromise. Would you have voted for that legislation or not?
Not as written. There are things I like in it and other things that I didn't. I didn't like the fact that I don't think it did much to actually reduce inflation, especially in the short term. And I don't think our leaders are doing enough on that front. Here in Utah, our inflation rate is worse than in most other states. My family and most others here are being crushed by inflation. And we need leaders and need a Senate who is going to focus on actually delivering more results to lower inflation. I did like the fact that it started to allow Medicare to negotiate on prescription drugs. We pay far more for prescription drugs than we need to in America. That comes as a result of people like my opponent, Senator Lee, taking lots of money from big pharma special interest groups and then preventing taxpayers from negotiating lower prescription drugs in a free market. And that's got to end, and again, why I'm running to replace Senator Lee.
On the issue of abortion, in 2016, when you were running for president, you had said you wanted to see Roe v. Wade overturned. When you and I talked on a podcast a couple months ago, your concern was that the overturn was creating some extreme laws, and you were worried about those. Do you think there needs to be federal legislation that sets some sort of minimum standard? And would you support Lindsey Graham's bill that I guess one would argue is attempting to do that, banning abortion after 15 weeks, but allowing it up till then?
Well, look, for any piece of legislation that has a chance of passing the Senate, I'll give it a close look. But the reality is that most of these bills, if not all of them being introduced since the Supreme Court's decision, have been messaging bills that have either been intended just to make a political point or worse, to divide Americans. Chuck, I'm committed to finding a more constructive way forward on this issue. It's tearing the country apart, where extreme bills are being passed around the country, some of which my opponent has supported, which would not allow exceptions for the victims of rape or incest, even, for example. I think that's wrong, and we've got to stand up to those extremes. But more importantly, we've got to find a more constructive way forward, and that's about making contraception more available, doing more to support women, children, and families, and improving education on this matter, and that's where I'll focus my time.
And I want to just close one more time. There is no scenario where if you win this Senate seat, you will caucus with the Democrats if it means they would be in the majority.
I will not caucus with Democrats or Republicans. I'm going to maintain my independence because I think our country needs that, and certainly our state needs that. I've made that commitment, and for party bosses and others in Washington, they're going to have to figure out what this means for them. But I'm committed to maintaining my independence, and that is what I'm going to do.
Evan McMullin, the independent candidate from Utah. Really appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective with us. Stay safe on the trail.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.